Hello and welcome to SMPD, the podcast where we look back at the cartoons that shaped our childhood. I am Chris Bolton. With me, as always, my partner in podcasting, Mr. Mark Williams.
Hello.
And this episode, we are looking back at another Disney classic. It's been a while since we've done some Disney, so we figured we'd return with Recess.
Yeah, no, this I think was one of mine on the list. This came about slightly later than I thought, and certainly when I was old enough to probably know better. But I think this was around about 98, 99 it came about over here. So it had been on a Saturday morning when I was hungover. So it was quite good hangover fodder.
Yeah.
I blitzed the first series yesterday. And I mean, I sat down to entire 13 episodes. So yeah, I mean, I think that threw me a little bit because it just went by so quickly. But what also threw me is how many of them I remembered.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a similar relationship with this to you, probably even slightly more removed out. Again, that slight age difference between us. Yeah, I think you're right. I think I was probably 18 or 19, possibly even pushing 20 by the time this came out. I was certainly too old to be watching Saturday morning cartoons, as if there's such a thing. But, you know, we all go through that weird kind of phase. I think I was just coming back around to cartoons at that point. I've been through the thing of like cartoons are for kids, and I was coming back around and just accepting the fact that I love them. And if you don't like that, tough shit.
Yeah.
But I specifically remember with Recess, I heard about it through word of mouth. Like this thing had massive, even amongst like adults essentially of my age at that point. It started just growing. People was like, have you been watching this Recess? Have you seen Recess? You know, that sort of thing. Not like everybody going like, oh, it's the best thing ever, but it was just something that I was aware of through people's conversations. So I just caught, I guess, one or two to begin with, and yeah, it's hangover fodder definitely. But I think it also kind of, in a weird way, even though we were still very early doors, I still distinctly remember my first thought on watching it was it triggered a weird kind of Nicktoons nostalgia for me. It felt, even though it was Disney, it very much felt like a Nickelodeon kind of jam.
Yeah.
And having rewatched now, I've rewatched quite a few as well. I've had a hectic week as normal. We were just talking off air, and I've had a particularly hectic last couple of days, to be honest. But somehow I've managed to carve out the time. I've done half the first season. I haven't done the full first season, but somehow I managed to carve out the time. And it wasn't a case of, I say carve out the time. I sat down with the express sort of mindset of, right, I'm going to watch maybe one or two of these because I just need to, I remember it reasonably well. So I just need to do something, rewatch some stuff for the pod. But yeah, just started and didn't stop because time just flew by. It's a really fucking easy watch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I came out to it, like I say, I remember it being on, and no fucker I knew was up at like 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning. Especially if we'd been out on a Friday night. So this was nobody was talking about it in my circle, but it was one of those that it was on. We didn't have Sky at the time. We didn't have cable or anything like that. So we literally had 5 channels. One of which was in Welsh, so we didn't really bother.
I was going to say, I think this on Channel 4 though, or am I making
no? It was on. It was on ITV.
It was ITV. Was that? I knew it was one of the two, but for some reason,
whatever the show that Fern Cotton did. It was on there because I remember her introducing it. But yeah, so I mean, I remember seeing this. And especially being out on a Friday night, there's no fucking way anybody was still up watching. Was getting up to watch this. But you know, I mean, I don't sleep anyway. So even if we'd been out and had a skinful, I'd still be up by like 7:30 anyway. So yeah, it was on, and I can remember sort of watching it quite a few times when I was hungover, and then quite a few more times when I wasn't, where I hadn't been out on a Friday night or I hadn't had a skinful, and I'd been out for a couple of quiet ones, and I'd still be up. So I'd make a point of putting it on because I didn't want to watch the news, and whatever was on BBC at the time was crap, and Channel 5 was crap, still is. So I said, well, I'll chuck ITV on, and this was on. I remember sort of not specifically getting up for it, but it was one of those that if I was awake and the TV was on, then I would change the channel to put this on because it would be better than anything else that was on. But I mean, you're right. Yeah. It's the sort of the Nicktoons feel to it. I mean, I will come on to sort of some of the humor and some of the style and that later on. But yeah, it's very much a departure from your standard Disney show at this point.
Very, very much so. Having said that, you know, it's clearly Disney animation. It's very slick.
Yeah.
The voice cast is exceptional as always. But it just in its production design, its art style, it's got that kind of weird, kind of off off color palette that you get in a lot of the Nicktoons. Slightly more reserved because it is Disney, but it definitely kind of evokes that Nicktoons feeling. Slightly scratchy art style as well. Just really.
Yeah, I kind of likened it to King of the Hill.
Yes, again, with I could see that in there as well. Yeah, I could definitely see that in there as well. And for those of you on video, my camera's just gone flying. There you go. Apologies to everybody on audio. Yeah, it's definitely got that kind of look to it. I mean, to me, when I first started watching it, and perhaps the reason that I didn't watch it initially, and I waited for this word of mouth, was it kind of, for some reason, just reminded me of Hey Arnold, and I don't know why. I really don't know why.
They were the same sort of time.
Yeah, and it just looked like it was the same sort of thing, and I was definitely a Nicktoons kid, so I was like, as we've discussed at length on this podcast before, so I was just like, well, I don't know, do I need this? I mean, I'm pushing 20 at this point, do I need it? And then, yeah, eventually, so many people were talking about it. I was like, I've got to watch this thing, and then, yeah, much like you said, it was a case of if I am awake on Saturday morning and the TV is on, this is what I'm watching, and so it actually became a real Saturday morning cartoon of old. It was just like when you were a kid. It was like, oh, I'm up. Okay, cool. I'm going to put Recess on. Yeah. So, yeah, like I don't have the same level of nostalgia for it that we have for some of the shows that we've talked about because I wasn't a kid watching it. But having said that, it's still like 20-year-old now and changed.
97 it started.
Shit. So, yeah, it's still quite a long time ago. And it was still... It was still quite nice going back and watching it. But I feel like with this, more than the others, like going back and watching this now, kind of feels like discovering it fresh because I've never rewatched it. And it's not something that's ever really, other than when we were putting the list together. And yeah, I'm pretty sure it was one of your picks, other than you mentioned in Recess and me going, oh, yeah, okay. That's probably about the only time I've thought about it in the last 20 odd years. And that's from me, a massive Disney nerd. But still, about the only time I thought about Recess is you going, should we do Recess? And me going, oh, yeah. All right, then. And of course, now it's on Disney Plus. So,
yes,
as are the umpteen TV specials and films. Yeah. So it's all available to everybody.
The only one that's not is the Christmas one, apparently, unless they put out with the episodes.
Might be in their Christmas collection.
Could be.
Because they have Christmas collections and Valentine's collections and shit like that. So who knows? But maybe it's not. But so yeah, it was. I didn't know what to expect going into this. Is the thing. It wasn't one that I was really anticipating watching, and it also wasn't one that I was dreading. So I was like, I don't know what I'm going to come into. But yeah, it certainly held my attention for much longer than I expected it to. And I think a great part of that is down to, you've already touched on it, but the humor and the writing in this is spot on. Which we kind of used to Disney hitting out of the park with stuff like that. Anyway, nothing is done by halves with them. But this one specifically, I think King of the Hill actually is an interesting comparison. I was going to go for Rugrats in terms of its actual writing. But it's definitely one of those shows that's actually an adult show, but pitched at kids, in the same vein as Rugrats was as well, in that, there are some quite complex themes. There's a lot going on beneath the surface with some of these characters as well. And I don't mean it's an adult show in terms of the humor being smutty or anything like that. Far from it. It's too sophisticated, if anything. And actually, what you get and what drew me in when I was watching this time is this kind of real microcosm that you've got in the playground. Like there is a whole society within that playground.
A whole class structure and everything.
Yeah, it's really well thought out. Obviously, that is the purpose of the show. They're drawing this kind of comparison between the playground and real life, and it's something, as we've talked about before with school, it's a universal topic to all of us. Yes. But this kind of slightly breaks that trend by not being about high school or what we would call comprehensive school then, and actually going back to primary school, or I think that's middle school in America, isn't it?
So,
something like that. I don't know the American school system very well, other than high school, because that's the one in all the films. But
but I mean, it is interesting because, as it is that universal experience, but it has lots of similar themes. You'll have themes about outsiderism and stuff, coming in from scratch and not knowing anybody and that sort of thing. You have things with the class structure. You have these sort of fairly stereotypical characters. You have your geeks, your jocks, your cool girls, and all the rest of it. So you kind of have that, but it's just done in a way that, again, even a lot of people don't. In America, a lot of kids don't make it through high school. Yeah. So to take it even further back, then they have
better gun control, people.
I was thinking more their literacy levels, but
okay.
But yeah, gun control as well. That's kind of important. But yeah, so I mean, a lot of American students don't finish high school for a myriad of reasons, but the majority will finish grade school.
Yeah.
So again, this is it's going back to harking back to the universal experience. But there are some really quite dark themes explored. I mean, there's an episode in season 1 where Gretchen picks up an admirer, and he full on stalks her, and he's making public declarations, and all the time she's telling him, "Fuck off, I'm not interested." And there's this proper sort of toxic relationship thing they're going for. And how she deals with it in particular, she ignores him. She doesn't initially tell him fuck off. She initially ignores it. She gets wound up by it, but she doesn't do anything. And then he goes too far, and then she goes too far. And there's this interesting thing there. And again, you will find, that is something that you will have or you will experience at some point in your life, is a relationship that isn't healthy.
Yeah.
And be it a romantic relationship or a family relationship or a friendship, there will always be something where there's a partner within that relationship who is dominant to a point of not quite abuse. That doesn't seem to be the way. That's not as far as they go in this episode, but it's that type of thing where it's teaching kids to recognize, actually, this isn't healthy, this isn't right. So there were some quite adult themes that they put forward for what is now. Actually, I guess, the kids are 9, 10, so it's aiming for that sort of audience, that sort of tween audience. So yeah, I thought that was quite interesting. I thought it was quite a brave place to come from with it.
Yeah, and again, that's very similar to Rugrats, and it's been a while since we did the Rugrats episode now, so therefore it's been a while since I watched some Rugrats. But
yeah.
I specifically remember when we did that episode bouncing off it now, and I knew I bounced off it in later years as well, looking back at it, because it came at that stuff so directly and with such a heavy hand, and it was so grim about it. That I bounced off it, whereas this has a kind of lightness of touch, I feel, that didn't. Like, yes, that's definitely a very heavy subject to touch on for what is, as you say, a children's animated show, but they handle it very deftly, and they still manage to get the yucks out of it, and ultimately the message comes across, I think, because it's sugar-coated and wrapped up. You bring the viewer in more. So I think actually this, and look, I'm aware, especially on a show about cartoons, that like negging on Rugrats is practically blasphemy, I know, but look, I've done it before, so I'm going to do it again. This time with less casual racism, hopefully. Still adamant that wasn't my fault.
Yeah.
I was careful as I possibly could be, but some things have to be discussed. Anyway, what I'm saying is I feel like Rugrats kind of just Rugrats actually was an adult show. Let's face it, and that's what we said at the time. It deals with depression in quite a heavy-handed way. And it attempts to deal with all of these adult themes in a mature and adult way, just through the lens of the babies. Whereas this doesn't try and do that. It's like, look, here's a bunch of real weighty themes, but actually, we're just going to let them bubble away under the surface here. And for the adults watching and for the older kids watching, if you want them, here they are. But for everybody else, here's like all the goofy slapstick shit as well.
Yeah. And lots of the hijinks of being in school and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. And I think part of it as well is they're able to get... I don't think this is a criticism you can level at Rugrats, to be fair. I think they have this in common with Rugrats. Part of it is that the main cast of characters are all so well observed as well.
Yes.
That actually that gets... it would have been very easy to, as you say, have the jock and the popular girl and the misfit and, and have all of those, essentially have an animated Breakfast Club.
Yeah.
But they don't do that. They go for a bunch of regular kids, and they're all regular kids with regular problems. Like, they're not super popular, but they're not super dorky either.
Yeah.
They are who they are. And each of them then sort of comes into their own and grows as character. Like, yes, okay, to an extent, you do have the fat kid, and you do have, within their little society, you do have one that's larger than the rest, and then you have Gretchen, who's slightly geeky and stuff like that. But they're not the outcasts in the school by any stretch. No. Is what I'm saying. They're all fully realized characters, and that helps as well.
It does, and if you look at their group, there are a couple of episodes in that first season. I haven't watched seasons 2 and 3, but I'm aware of stuff that goes on in them. But it's not as if they're a group of misfits and they've kind of found each other because they've got nobody else. Because anytime anything's happened, they will go to Swinger Girl, or they will go to the Digging Guys, or they will go to whoever, and nobody's like, "Well, fuck you. What do you know?
Yeah,
you're one of that lot. You're nothing to do with me. Fuck off." There's none of that. It's very much this. They're well liked enough and popular enough. They don't have to. No, they're not amongst the super cool clique. They're just there, and people are very much accepting of that. And I think that's something that, with the exception of possibly the Ashleys, you don't really see a lot of. No, you see a lot more of that side of school dramas when you get them. You have you're very insular cliques, and you can't penetrate them, and they don't want to know anybody else because they're better than everybody else. And with the exception of the Ashleys, you don't get that in this show. Like even the different of the fifth graders and the sixth graders, you don't get that. There's not this us and them mentality all the time.
No, even I mean, in the half season that I watched, the king of the playground occurs quite a lot, and he's never like this unapproachable older kid. Like they're always able to go and speak to him and get an audience with him and get what they want out of him. So yeah, I think it's very well observed. In fact, my favorite episode of the ones that I watched, I think, is episode 2. But there's one that deals with essentially puberty, but they're dealing with it through the lens of 9 and 10-year-olds.
Yeah.
And there's a whole setup about boys kissing girls, and they have to have this kiss. So they set it up that TJ and Spinelli are going to have this kiss, and they're dreading it. And the traditional way to approach this is, of course, to have them kiss, and then all of a sudden, when everybody's gone and they're all sort of past the old ew, they kiss and stuff like that, to have them actually secretly enjoy it, and all of a sudden maybe do it again or start to realize they've got feelings for one another. None of that. You go through that whole gamut in the lead up to it. So you get all of that stuff. You get all of that exploration of what a relationship is and what it means. And actually, bubbling under the surface here, there is some stuff about maybe homosexuality should be accepted as well. Bearing in mind, this is the 90s as well. It's not modern day, but there is a lot of talk about men and women. And why is it got to be men and women? There's a lot of that going on there.
Yeah.
And that's all handled really well. And then you get to the point where they have this kiss, and it does exactly what you would expect it to do, being these are 9 and 10-year-olds. Everybody fucks off after making fun of them. And a pair of them just go, yeah, what are we going to do then? Should we go and play in the climbing frame or something? Yeah, fuck it. Like, that happened. Move on. And that's that. And they just drop it. And I think that's great, because that, again, is one of those kind of just life experiences that I think most of us have had at some point, especially those of us that were in kind of mixed gender friend groups as well, which, could be a rare thing in school, but, that's just...
Especially at that age, actually, as well.
Yeah. And that's just one of those things that does happen. It's like, should we try this out? What's this about? And, they've obviously probably just given each other the worst kiss of their lives, but they're just like, well, whatever, that happened, move on. And it's just dropped. Like later on, then it was just a thing that happened, and I think there's something really nice and genuine about that. So they do really well to deal with, and especially, as I say, early doors. I think it's episode 2, so we're barely getting to know these characters at this point.
Yeah,
this is the kind of accomplished stuff you'd expect them to drop, sort of, a season or 2 in, where you can just go, maybe even there has been an on again, off again thing between the two of them. No, none of it. They just throw it in there.
No, it's like it's one and done. It's like, right, okay, well that was the stupidest thing I've ever done. Fuck it, let's go play dodgeball.
But even at that point, you get the build up to it, and it's like, oh, we're going to draw straws. We're going to draw straws for who's going to kiss each other. And you just know that it's going to be TJ and Spinelli. They've already done all of that work in the first 2 episodes. We're just like, well, okay, he's clearly our leading man. She's clearly our leading lady. So it's going to be those 2.
Yeah,
that's just what it's going to be. And so they managed to accomplish that very easily. There is a hell of a lot to be said for the writing in this show. Yeah, definitely. And as I say, animation as well, being Disney, it's slick as you would expect. There's nothing. I have nothing bad to say about the animation. It's a different style to your traditional Disney. It's not as colorful, but maybe that's not a bad thing either. But I don't think, like, looking at it, if you were to put this in front of somebody, I don't think there is a person that would say that's a Disney cartoon.
No, and I mean, I think it was a departure from what you'd had before. So the coloring of it is different. The style, it's very slick, but the style is very different. And then you went from that, and then you went into, there was a whole raft of new Disney stuff, which was very bright, that came after that, around about the 2000 or so, the 2000 point. And I think that was roughly when they redesigned Mickey and Minnie Mouse again, wasn't it? For the umpteenth time. And so this really does stand out as being not a Disney project.
Yeah, definitely. I'm not sure. Yeah, there probably was a Mickey redesign about then. I have the feeling that was probably when we would be moving towards the kind of 3D Mickey Mouse Clubhouse stuff.
Yeah.
Certainly not the most recent redesign, if that's when you think of that. Was far more recent than that.
No, that was a lot more recent.
Yeah, but yeah, there's definitely, it's got all those kind of hallmarks of quality, but just none of that kind of baggage that goes along with it. And it very much feels like they were able to cut loose. I think the closest Disney comparison I can draw to it is Goof Troop.
Yeah.
And that's not so much in terms of the animation, but more in terms of the writing. It shares that kind of animated sitcom, real world problem kind of vibe that Goof Troop has. And I haven't blown Goof Troop on this show for a good 6 months or so now, so I figure it's about time I did. You know my feelings on that. One of the best fucking animated shows ever made, if you ask me. So yeah, I was just straight into this immediately. As soon as I started watching it, I was like, oh yeah, I remember why I like this now. So that was quite a pleasant surprise for me, coming to it with a place of like, don't remember much about it. Couldn't even remember the character names, to be honest, when we first sat down
I
to watch
remember
it.
most of them. I couldn't remember Gus. I could see Gus. I couldn't remember his name. I had a feeling that Mikey was called Mikey, but I wasn't sure. And yeah, I remember TJ, Spinelli, and Gretchen. Couldn't remember Randall. I remember Miss Finster, bizarrely.
See, that was the one I kept forgetting. I knew her face, but I was like, who's that?
I think everyone had a Miss Finster, didn't they? Like
Yeah, definitely.
Everybody in your junior school, infant school sort of life, there would have been that teacher who had a reputation, because they were strict. They had a reputation for being an absolute hard ass. And once you actually got to know them, they weren't too bad. But if you were never in their class, they were an absolute bastard, and you never wanted to fall foul of them.
There was always the one that you were scared of. Yeah. Not that you didn't respect the authority of most teachers, but there was always one where you're like, you don't want to get caught by that one.
Especially at that sort of age.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Because at that sort of age, it's a big thing to be caught, and it's frightening as well. She always reminded me, and still does, and I don't know why, of Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, where they have the granny. Yeah, it's just always reminded me. I think it's probably just her figure, I think, is what it is. She's kind of hunched over and very top heavy. And I think that's what it was. So that, I think we've discussed it on the show before, that as a kid always creeped me out. So I think that helped certainly with my attitude towards her. But yeah, I could remember her face. I could remember as soon as she popped up on screen, I was like, oh yeah, that's her. I could remember the fucking principal because he looks like Nixon, and that's obviously meant to be.
So that's no accident.
That's no accident, particularly not when you draw the comparisons. Like, is it just me, or does this have something to say about communism?
Yes, there's very much a Cold War vibe about it.
Yeah, that's okay. I wondered if that was me, but there's definitely there, isn't it?
It's definitely, especially when you get like the safety rangers. There's sort of the military school aspect, and the nice teacher whose name I can't remember, the woman with the dark hair and the glasses. She's got a very sort of hippie-ish, anti-establishment sort of vibe to her. And then you get sort of the drill sergeant vibe off Finster and the bumbling commander from Brickley. So yeah, there's very much a sort of Cold War aspect to that, and I think that's possibly because of the age of the writers. I mean, the writers, I'll look them up now, but I'd imagine they'd have been in their 30s. They'd have grown up with this sort of stuff.
Yeah. That's cool, because I wasn't sure if I was just looking for things, but I was just like, I'm pretty sure they're trying to say something, and maybe as the show goes on, that evolves even more. Yeah. And then, of course, you've got the fact that the theme tune itself sounds like some sort of fight and drum American military march, doesn't it? I was
going to say, it's very, very marching, isn't it?
Yeah, it's that kind of,
and you kind of introduce it as well. I mean, the second part of the first episode where Gus is introduced as the new kid in that half episode, like his father's a military person, and Gus's demeanor, clearly he's a little kid who's been brought up in a very regimented environment because he's fucking terrified of his own shadow. Because if he does something wrong, he knows he's going to get punished for it. And then it takes quite a bit for him to step out of line. I know. I mean, that whole episode where they break him, but everyone calls him new kid, even the teachers and all the rest of it. It takes him to breaking point, and that's when he stands up for himself. But all up until that point, and even after that, he's not. He doesn't like stepping out of line. He likes structure. He likes order, and that's again that would be that some militaristic, almost drill sergeant vibe, which you do get. You've got in a lot of 60s, 70s, even up to the early 80s sitcoms, where you had that character, and then you go to you look at things like Bill and Ted, where I can't remember which one it was, but they were going to be sent to military school, which father was going to send. It's always that sort of threat. So just living under this, there's very much that feel of Cold War and the threat of anti-Americanism, all this sort of stuff, and it's quite subtle.
Yeah,
but I mean, it's definitely there.
It's definitely there. It's also like you were talking about the Ashleys earlier, and there's an episode where the Ashleys jinx him, and he's like, because he won't speak.
Yes.
All of a sudden, paranoia just starts sowing throughout the school. Like he's hiding something. He must be, there's something going on there. Why is he acting the way he is? And they bring in these shady government agents, and it's like, hang on, there's something at work here. Like they know what they're going for. This isn't accidental.
Yeah, I mean, I was reading about later episodes earlier, and in the third series, because they're in the sort of the hundreds in terms of episode number, where there's a suggestion that I can't remember her name now. I have to look up the teacher, the nice one. Is it Miss Grudy?
fuck knows. Again, me and names, like I've only watched half of them, so I've got the main names down, and that's it.
Miss Crocky. So there's an episode where they suggest that she might be a spy. There's an episode where the sort of the sub episode is called "The Kid Who Came In from the Playground." There's some very definite nods to that sort of genre, that type of thing. So there are certain allusions to it which are more subtle than others. But then later on, they just go all out for it.
I mean, do they ever place it in a time period? I'm not sure that they do.
They don't. There are things in there that kind of do. So, like, there is in. I can't remember what the episode title is, but it's like a parents' night or a parents' evening type thing. And Spinelli hires two drunks from a car park to go and pretend to be her parents because her parents are so embarrassing. And she lies at one point and says her parents are secret agents. And then the joke at the end is that the father is actually a spy, and he has a mobile phone in his shoe, like a proper James Bond, kitschy gadget. So I mean, there's that type of thing. So they do that. They do have. I want to say they do have computers. There are computers featured at some point.
So I mean, I guess fashion sort of plays it as well, doesn't it? I mean,
fashion's kind of all over the place. I mean, TJ very much looks like early 90s.
Definitely.
The Ashleys look kind of similar period. Vince looks 80s. Gretchen looks 80s. Gus looks like he could be anything from the 50s up. Spinelli looks kind of late 80s, early 90s. So I mean, I'm guessing it's kind of contemporary, really.
Yeah, I mean, TJ's where I get my draw from with fashion like that.
Well, yeah, because he's the main dude.
Early, like he dresses like I dressed as a kid, so I'm like, that's like an early '90s kid. Well,
jeans, t-shirt, hoodie.
Yeah, pretty much. So yeah, you're right. Actually, why did I say as a kid? I still fucking dressed like that. Yeah, what? So yeah, that sort of places it for me as well. But yeah, I was just wondering whether it actually was meant to be taking place around the time. But no, I guess it is slightly too contemporary for that. But then there's even things like there's that episode where they're going to pull down the climbing frame.
Yeah.
And they basically have a peaceful sit-in to stop the climbing frame being pulled down. And there's this anti-establishment thing going on there as well with like power to the people and stuff like that. And so it's definitely got something to say.
Yeah.
And I'm glad it wasn't just me, because as I say, I've only watched about half of the season. So I was like, well, maybe I'm just picking up on this and it's not actually there. But you've watched further than I have. So it's definitely in there, isn't it? And that's pretty bold and pretty smart for what is essentially being aired as a kid's show.
Yes.
In, pushing the 2000s when we're like 30 years removed from this stuff, like.
We're at this point where more or less 10 years past the end of the Cold War. And from its height, where you did have the paranoia of G-men coming and snatching people out of their offices and out of their homes because they were suspected they were communists. I mean, you were talking 50s at that point, McCarthyism and all that.
Yeah, that's
you're talking mid-50s, so we're 40 years plus from that point. So it's definitely not there. I mean, they've definitely picked up a couple. No, there are definitely a couple of themes in there which are subtle, but you can definitely pick them up if you're looking for them.
Yeah, It for me, they were smacking me in the face, but I didn't know whether I was looking for them and whether actually, I'm watching it with slightly too old a mindset then, but I didn't think I was, because it does feel like a very adult show. As I say, it feels like today it's the kind of thing that, I mean, despite the fact there's no real like swearing or gross out humor or something like that, but today it very much feels like the type of thing you're going to see on Adult Swim or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, some of the jokes as well. I mean, so there's nuance from them, and they're clean jokes, but there's a joke whereby I can't remember what episode it was, but they're talking about various people coming in from out of town for something or other, and Springer Girl says, "Oh yeah, there's a swingers convention going on." And it's like, no, hang on, what? these are 10-year-olds, and because of who her character is, she's the girl who's always on the swing. You get away with it, but actually you think, but fucking hell, that's a bit close to the bone. There's a joke when they're talking about their futures, and I can't remember what the episode is. They're talking about their futures and how they need to do well in testing. I think it's one where Gretchen passes the cartoon version of the SATs, which she aces, and they're talking about fulfilling potential. And there's a comment about working in a video store on a Saturday night when you're not supposed to be there. And there's loads of shit like this, and they're so innocuous.
Yeah,
and it's just done. But it's it's the sort of thing that you would get if there was such a thing as a clean product from Trey Parker and Matt Stone.
Yes, very much so.
That's the sort of humor you would get. It's very pop culture heavy.
Yep.
which is another thing that sort of kind of bases it in time as well.
Yeah.
So it is very pop culture heavy. There are lots of throwaway lines from films, or parodies of film lines, film titles, all this sort of stuff. But it's subtle enough. They're not whacking you over the head with it. But at the same time, as you said earlier, if your older audiences, your adults watching it with the kids, or for your older kids who are watching it with their younger siblings, there's some absolute gold in here.
Yeah, and it's interesting actually. I've only just kind of thought about this now. This is knowledge that I had because Disney, but not knowledge that I'd ever put any sway into. This is a Disney cartoon. It's sold as Disney's Recess. Okay, Disney is right there, but actually it didn't air on the Disney Channel, did it? It was on ABC.
It was on ABC. I think it was on Toon Disney at some point.
Well, maybe it was, but I know it was definitely originally on ABC because I remember being in the States round about the time it was first coming out, and I remember it being advertised as being on ABC.
Yeah.
Now, again, there's just something to be said for that of like, look, ABC's a Disney network by this point, but it's not the Disney Channel. It's removed enough that they're able to get away with this kind of thing.
It
wouldn't on the Disney Channel.
Yeah, but I mean, it was first premiered on ABC on August 31st, 1997. Transitioned to ABC's Disney One Saturday morning program in September. Yes, I mean, it was always, as I said, it was a Disney product, and it was on a Disney block, but it wasn't on the Disney Channel. It later went to Toon Disney, and it's popped up on. It was on Disney Life. It's now on Disney Plus. So it's always been there, and they've never hidden it anywhere. Like, there are some products where there's some things where it's like, okay, it's a Disney product, but it's not front and center anywhere. They've just gone, fuck it, it's Recess, have it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's branded as Disney, and we all know it's Disney, but it was on another network, so it was like there was distance. Yeah. Like, things like the swinger gag that you brought up, for instance, there was distance. That's not being aired, 30 minutes after Mickey Mouse's Clubhouse is finished. It's not hot dog, hot diggity dog, and now he is in Swingers. It's like, it's not that. So there's something behind that as well, I think.
Yeah, and again, I think some of the characterizations as well, the way they set kindergartners up as savages and stuff like that. There's a gag early on.
They're just fucking brilliant. Those kindergartners.
That's brilliant.
There's a real Lord of the Flies thing going on down there, isn't
there? There is, and like the way they set it up. So the digging guys whose name I can't remember, they end up in China.
Yeah.
And they dig through to a kindergarten in China, and it's exactly the same. Whereas in the English speaking version in America was, let's eat them, and they all chase them out of the kindergarten area. They pop up through the floor tile, and in Chinese they eat them, and they all pile in after them. Yeah. And showing it against that universal experience, but just with that sort of gag, you never get. It's an older gag, and it's far too. It's not subtle at all, but it's far too un-Disney. It's far too correct. So I think you're right. I think they did get away with a lot because they weren't showing it themselves.
Yeah, and I think it's also. I mean, that's the other thing about it as well with the adult humor. It is, and it has this in common with Rugrats as well, to be fair. But again, I think it nails it more succinctly. It has that kind of slight surrealism to it as well, in that they're real world problems and they're very well observed characters. But things like the kindergartners just being savages, just being this group of savages, is the type of stuff you'd expect to see on Rugrats. It's the flight of fancy, where it's an observation more than it is. Like, we know they're not really savages, but left to their own devices with no adults around, that's what toddlers can look like. They can be running around screaming, kicking the shit out of things.
Yeah, covered in paint with no clothes on.
Yeah, and again, you sort of think like that observation is not an observation that a child of 9 or 10 would make, because they're still children themselves at that point. But it's definitely an observation that adults will be like, oh, for fuck's sake, these fucking kids, they're driving me up the wall. They're savage.
Yeah. And the same with things like the king of the playground and stuff like that. To have a literal king of the playground.
Yes.
As opposed to just the cool kid who everyone looks up to, or the kid who beats everybody up, so he's king because nobody wants to tell him otherwise. To have an actual guy with a crown and what would be a scepter, except it's a hockey stick, and he's carried around on a fucking ratty old armchair. It's just that it's that. It's that surrealism. That's a flight of fancy whereby people can identify it, even though it's as an adult, you're going, well, that's fucking stupid. Who's carrying around a bloody armchair on a set of sticks? But actually, we all remember that hierarchy school. There was always that kid who was cooler, stronger, faster, better than everybody else.
Yeah.
And so everybody, whether they wanted to or not, they were forced to look up to them. And it's just the way they've put that on screen in such a way that they're not. No, I mean, I certainly remember my would have been my junior school days where we had a kid like that. He was an absolute cunt. But he knew he was a cunt as well. But that was kind of how it worked. Whereas this is just done in a way that actually, this guy, he happens to be the king of the playground, and it might be because he's not a cunt, it's because he's fair, or because he's approachable, or he's slightly humble, albeit slightly dickish at times. And then you see the opposite of that, where Gus becomes king for a day, and Gus becomes a complete fucking despot. Yeah. In the space of 2 days, I think it is, where he introduces a cookie tax. And he punishes people because they don't have cookies in their lunchbox, or because somebody looked at him funny. As we've all seen that kid as well.
Yeah. So not only have we all seen that kid, we all still see that kid in our working environments and our daily lives.
Well, yeah, that's it.
There's definitely, this isn't fucking news to anybody, but there's definitely parallels to be drawn between, the schoolyard and the office, for instance.
Yes.
And that's fucking news to nobody.
And US government for the last 4 years.
Yeah, but I think this nails it absolutely bang on. They get that. They observe these character tropes so well. And as I say, they actually present them in such a way that they just appear like nice, normal, regular kids or people that you would know. They're not those cardboard cutout versions things. So yeah, when Gus becomes king for a day, we're able to go on that journey with him, and we're able to see him. And it makes sense that he would become that, because again, coming from a super strict military background, it makes sense that he would then impose law and order and impose rule, because that's what he's had done to him.
Yeah, and I mean as well. Drawing comparison to King of the Hill, drawing comparison to Rugrats. But if you were to try and age it up, you could quite easily transpose these characters into certainly the American version of The Office.
Yeah,
you I can't remember his name. The guy with the glasses, Schrute. I can't remember his first name. But he's got that's a Randall malicious compliance side to him. You've got Jim, who's your everyman, who everybody's supposed to, he's your TJ, everybody's supposed to like, everyone's supposed to root for. And you can pick out some of these characters they've got in the two shows as parallels. It's quite interesting. I've only thought about it as we were talking, but there are definite parallels. And I think that's one of the reasons that show works as well so much better than the UK version, because the characters are so much better observed. And I think that's a lot down, as we said earlier, a lot of that's down to the writing and how much effort has gone into actually making these characters rather than caricatures.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak to that. I've never seen The American Office. I am, however, a massive Gervais fan, so I would probably disagree with you on it being better observed than the British one. But I don't know. I've never seen it, so I can't comment. But yeah, as I say, you can see how these characters reflect people that you would see in an office, and that's the whole purpose of that show. So at least the UK one anyway, I'm assuming the American one is exactly the same thing.
More or less, only
with
the
a different
jokes
accent.
I mean, I was not talking about The Office, but the jokes tend to be more evenly distributed. It's not one bloke trying to make himself look funnier than everybody else.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, we'll agree to disagree.
Yeah, as we have for the last 20 years.
Yeah, before this turns into a whole different podcast. My camera's gone again.
Yeah.
Don't know what's going on tonight.
I don't know what you've done to it tonight. I think it's pissed.
Yeah, probably. Where were we? Before we went off onto The Office and my camera went wonky. Rules of the Playground, things like that. So yeah, it gives you that. We've already talked about the class structure, but it gives you that it's baked in essentially. You have a sitcom ready to go here, and they just run with that, which I think a lot of these animated sitcoms that we talk about, and we use the term a lot on this show, it's like an animated sitcom, and most of them are, but they stretch for that, whereas this doesn't. It just naturally feels like it wouldn't feel out of place. I'm glad they don't do this, but it wouldn't feel out of place to have a laughter track on the top, much like the Flintstones did in the day or the Jetsons did in the day, because I feel like this is that well observed.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that, the thing that makes it stand out as well is that there was, and not so much from a cartoon perspective, and there were cartoon versions, but certainly from a live action perspective, there were about 52 billion live action child and teen sitcoms about school, which revolved around class and grades and all the stuff, and extracurriculars and all the stuff you do in school. But none of it was about expression. None of it was about individuality. So none of it got to be the idea of pinning on Recess is that actually you're not hamstrung into those you have to be, you have to be quiet, you have to be subservient, you have to be all the rest. It is, these are kids trying to express themselves and trying to learn how to express themselves in an environment where they're not being suppressed at all. And because of that, they have then built their own microcosm based on their own life experiences. So it's an interesting one because nobody else did that. Everything else, you never saw them. You look at a Saved by the Bell or a Sister Sister or anything like that, you never saw them at recess. You never saw them. They were either at home or at school, or occasionally they were at the mall or a job. You never saw them interacting with their peers in free time.
No, and there's something interesting to that structurally in there, because the reason they do that is because, having the lesson structure or the structure of go to school, go to work on the weekend, go home.
Yeah.
That gives you a time structure. It gives you a narrative structure that you can work within. You can use that sometimes then for elements of ticking time bombs where there's going to be a test or there's something coming up at work or whatever.
Yeah.
This just bins all of that and it just goes, no, this is a show about these characters. And sometimes they are just going to be dicking around in the playground. Like, there are episodes like the one with old Rusty, the climbing frame, where they're going to knock it down. There's a race against time element to that with this sitting and stuff. But then, like, the one with the kissing is just like, well, look, they're going to work this through much. And it's almost like a fucking Seinfeld episode. It's just a bunch of characters talking about what this is.
Yeah.
There's very little action to it. It's just about, we're going to talk this out.
Yeah.
And that's what they do for like 15 minutes. They talk it out, build up to it, and then go, meh.
Yeah, done now. Actually, there's when we were talking about it, I forgot to mention something I really liked in that. The whole thing whereby this is this huge clandestine thing. It's an experiment. It's been done in the name of science. Nobody's going to tell, and now the whole school is there. And they go, "Oh, I didn't tell anybody. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't tell anyone. Well, maybe I told one kid."
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, you get, I think it was Mikey's going on about how disgraceful it was, how disrespectful it was. And then somebody walks out, "Thanks for the tip. I nearly missed it." And he just shrinks into the back of the group. And it's so well observed. But again, we all know that person who runs their mouth completely all the time. Yeah. And then somebody says something to prove them wrong, and they don't want to answer. So they just try to slink into the background and hope nobody noticed.
Yeah, it just in general, I don't think there's an episode I've watched where any gag like that just isn't completely on the nail. Like, they observe things. So, like, even again, that episode where all of a sudden the crowd is there and then they said, all right, well, we're going to reschedule the kiss. And then the Chinese whisper starts going on. Kiss is being rescheduled for tomorrow. It's on for tomorrow. And then because of that, they go, oh, no, fuck it.
Fuck it, do it now. Then.
So it goes back around again. And it's like, yeah, that is exactly how school playgrounds work. That is exactly how office gossip works. That is exactly how gossip in general works. Like, they nailed it. And that would happen in school. So-and-so is going to have a fight at Apples 3 down by the fucking football.
Down by the bins.
Like, yeah, exactly. Like, there's going to be a fight going on. Right. And it starts off as just like two little gangs of 2 or 3 people talking about it. Before you know it, the whole fucking school's down there. It's no wonder they always used to get broken up, because teachers knew about it before it even fucking happened. Yeah, because they hear people talking about it.
Yeah, I mean, there was a very early Simpsons episode with that. It was Bart the General, it was called, where there's a fight with Nelson.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing. Like, no, nobody's supposed to know about it, but everybody's talking about it. So immediately, it's the biggest thing, and everybody from the entire fucking school is there. Mm-hmm. And yeah, you're right. I mean, short of a purple monkey dishwasher, that's exactly the gag you want of Chinese Whispers. The way they set it up. That, as I said, it just keeps going and going and going. So self-perpetuating to a point where you never get away from it. You might as well get on with it.
Yeah, exactly. And then, there's just all of these little things. You said we've talked about that. We've talked about the kindergartners. Talked about King of the Playground and the Ashleys. Like, they've all got their own just place within this society that is the playground. And then the second they go to class, they all just fall into line again.
Yeah.
So it becomes less interesting once you impose that class structure. As you say, there's something to be said about just letting them run free, because they're not, yes, okay, the teacher shows up to bust things up every now and again and be an antagonist. But if this was set within the classroom, those, like, you wouldn't have King of the Playground, for instance.
No.
Because he wouldn't be in a class with them to start with. And if he was, the teacher wouldn't let him lord it over all the other kids in the way he does.
Yeah. I mean, I quite like that. Quite like King Bob, because he's a more accomplished version of Fonzie.
That's a good comparison. I hadn't thought of that. Yes, that is a good comparison. He's the slightly older, cooler kid.
Yeah, where everybody looks up to, but actually in this case,
and actually isn't a dick, even though he could be.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. That's a really good comparison, actually. I hadn't seen that, but yeah. So it's just another one of those kind of sitcom. There are so many sitcoms you can compare this to, because it is so fucking good at what it is. That's what it is. There's very little else to say about this other than it's a very fucking good sitcom. Like
It
ridiculously
is.
good, too good to be just thrown on at 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning.
Yeah, and the other thing I found is that because of the way they were done, and most things were done this way at the time, they were two 10-minute stories in a 20-minute episode. Most of the time, I was thinking, hang on, they could have done more of that. They could have done more with that. They could have stuck another 5 minutes in that quite comfortably and not over-egged it.
Yeah.
There were some stories which they felt they're 10 minutes, but no more. But there were others, they were 10 minutes, thinking, fuck, is that it?
Yeah, it does. It
I missed
absolutely
something.
zips by. Every single episode I watch just zips by. And they're all kind of one and done as well. There's not really any kind of overarching narrative, so there's no like, oh, I need to watch the next one, or I need to watch the next one. It draws you in and holds you.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is I'm not hungry for the next one. It's just on, and it's consistently good. So I just let the next one play.
Well, that was it. That's what I did, because I put it on last night, and I watched one on Sunday. And I watched it Sunday afternoon. The kids were in the room. They were mildly interested, which is usually a good sign because they didn't ask me to turn it off. So I got through the first double episode, if you like, and that was fine. And then I put the rest on. Everyone was in bed last night. I put it on about 10 o'clock, and I went through the entire first season, and without intending to, but I then went to bed at 2 o'clock.
Yeah.
Knowing full well I had to get up this morning with the kids. So I mean, it's that sort of thing. It's so inoffensive. You can just let it run. And when there were a couple of times like, oh shit, right, what time is it? I should probably turn it off now. Fuck, the next one started now. I'll watch this one now, but then I'll go to bed. 20 minutes later, oh shit, this one just started. Right, I'll watch this one now, then I'll go to bed. And yeah, I remember looking at the clock. It was about 11:15, and then it was 10 to 2. I was like, right, okay, I'm actually going to bed now.
It's actually, and when I say it's wasted on sort of 9 a.m., that's what it feels like to me. And again, there's a bit of a nostalgia kick to this, but it feels like perfect late night TV to me. Like when back when this was airing, when I was 19, 20, and TV in my bedroom, still living at home at that point. I hadn't quite moved out for the first time. So I was still living at home. Just watching this sort of stuff like this at kind of 11, 12 o'clock at night on a TV in the bedroom with the volume low so you don't wake everyone else in the house up. I'd be watching, it wouldn't be this because this was on early, but I'd be watching reruns of Seinfeld, or I'd be watching Friends, or I'd be watching something like that. Just easy watching TV, just letting these sitcoms wash over you as you fall asleep. And that's what this feels like to me. It doesn't feel like early morning, get up and watch it. It feels like stick it on late at night and just let it wash over you.
Yeah, and to me, it reminds us. I mean, that was another reason for the King of the Hill comparison. It does feel it feels that sort of way where it wouldn't be out of place if it was on Channel 4 at 11:30 at night.
Yeah,
and you could just leave it on and I say fall asleep, or read a book while you're watching it, or just be doing whatever, because it's you don't have to concentrate on it super hard, but it's hard to ignore it.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, thinking about it, no, I think I probably hadn't moved out when this was on. So it wouldn't have been the time this was on, but that still was a thing that I would have done. It's been a fucking long day, really. So yeah, I mean, I don't really have too much else to say, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. I can't find anything bad to say about it. I can't find anything particularly, I've got no nostalgia for it that I can go, oh, do you remember this? Do you remember that? Because I was older when it happened. But unlike when we watched something like Kim Possible, which I never really caught first time around.
Yes.
I did watch this first time around. I feel like I've just come back to it fresh. And I don't feel like I've got a new take on it. I feel like once I actually started watching it first time around, I thought all of this stuff as well and thought it was good. Yeah. But I just feel like that's kind of been reawakened a little bit. So it's not so much nostalgia, this as rediscovering it, I think.
Yeah, that was the same for me. I mean, I remember watching it when it first came on. And then, like yourself, I mean, I was aware there were movies. I was aware that there were like 60-odd episodes. I certainly haven't seen all of those, although I was surprised I'd seen as many as I had. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, this was something that it pops in my head in dispatches, mainly things like The Box. That episode I remembered vividly. I have no fucking idea why. But then things like that will pop into my head. So I'll see. I remember I was. When I worked in my last job, we used to do a lot of street works, and there's some fences around a hole they dug in the floor, which was a perfect square for a manhole to be sunk into. I remember that made me think of it. Yeah. And then occasionally, I mean, you'd hear something, or there'd be somebody would make a comment, and you think, oh, that sort of thing Spinelli would have said, and so it's kind of been embedded in there without really taking up too much space. I mean, no, I couldn't go back and pull out quotes from episodes until yesterday when I started watching it for this. I couldn't go out and pull out individual episodes or individual stories involving individual characters, but I can remember enough of it, and there's enough in there for me to recall it. Hey Arnold was kind of the same, because that was the same sort of time, and I only ever think about that because there was a girl in my sixth form class whose surname was Arnold. So we always used to know that was our standard greeting, and she used to get really fucking annoyed. So then I'll see her in fucking Tesco's and stuff like that. So I won't greet her that way anymore because she'll fucking slap me. But that triggers that sort of memory, and I've got more of that than I do for Recess. But for some reason, it just kind of burned in. So when I was watching yesterday, I was thinking, oh yeah, I remember this. I remember Spinelli joining the Ashleys. I remember the one where their recesses rained off for 3 days and I was all stuck inside. I remember that. That was for no fucking reason whatsoever. And I've not thought about them. And so it was only yesterday when they were on. I was like, oh shit, yeah, I remember that.
See, no, I don't remember it that well at all. I just remember quite liking it, and I remember the fact that it was a bit of a buzzy thing. Whereas I certainly do remember Hey Arnold, and actually, I think that's on our list as well, and I'm looking forward to rewatching that because it was my least favorite Nicktoons at the time, probably because I was aging out, so it was my least favorite of them, and I think maybe that's even why, as I say, I didn't necessarily watch this first time out, because I drew that comparison to it for some reason, even though the characters look nothing alike. It was just the same sort of thing. I think maybe Gretchen and Helga were a bit kind of, so maybe that's where I was going with it. I don't know, but
there was something. So they did have a similar sort of feel, didn't they?
Yeah, there was something. I drew some sort of comparison anyway, and because I was kind of not a massive Hey Arnold fan, I was like, maybe I won't like this so much. But then, knowing now remembering how much I enjoyed this, and knowing how much I enjoyed it coming back to it, I'm quite interested to see what my response to Hey Arnold is going to be, because I suspected for a very long time that is actually a lot better than I gave it credit for as a kid, because I didn't hate it. It was just my least favorite of them, and I suspect actually I did not give it anywhere near enough credit.
Yeah, I mean, I've not rewatched or re-engaged with that at all since I was like 17, 18, whatever it would be. So again, I'm quite curious to see that. But I mean, certainly from memory, I would take Recess over Hey Arnold a million times out of a million, based on my memories of them. Going back for a rewatch would be quite interesting to see if that's still the same.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the same. I would probably take this over Hey Arnold as well. But my camera's gone again. Fuck's sake. This is really fucking, like, this must be really confusing for people listening. But people watching will understand.
It's some nice views of your ceiling.
Yeah, so I would definitely take it over Hey Arnold, but I'm interested to see if that'll change when we rewatch Hey Arnold. But at the moment, I would definitely say this is. Can't say it's been a surprise, as I say, because I just kind of rediscovered it. So I wasn't 100% sure going in what I was going to get here.
Yeah.
But I certainly didn't expect to watch as many of them as I did in a row. A bit like with Visionaries, really, but for all the right reasons, not for all the wrong ones.
Yeah.
So, yeah, pleasantly surprised. I probably will watch more, if I'm honest.
Yeah. I mean, if I have the time, I'll probably do the same. I mean, what I did last night is I put it on. I was playing FIFA at the time, and it just meant I ended up playing far longer than I planned to, because it was just, the episode's finished now, so the episode just started, so I might as well play another game because that'll sort of correspond time wise. And there was just a little bit of overlap, about 4 or 5 minutes every time.
Yeah.
And in the end, I had to consciously say, no, fuck it, I'm not playing anymore. I'll watch the end of this episode and then I'm going to bed.
Yeah.
And it took that sort of thing. So I mean, I can imagine because it's that sort of throwaway that most of the gags are spoken anyway. There aren't a huge there are lots of visual gags in there, but they're nowhere near as important or prevalent as the spoken gags. So I think that you can be doing something else and concentrate on something else and not miss anything.
Yeah, it's not slapsticky, is it? That's the thing. There isn't any shtick. There's not a lot of business. It is all verbal, which is why it feels so smart, I guess. So yeah, you definitely could leave it on in the background. I might give the film a spin because I don't know that I've ever seen it.
No, I haven't
So-
either. There are a couple of films. You've got there's a Christmas one, which was Miracle on Third Street.
Mhm.
Then there was Recess All Grow Down.
Yeah, wasn't this Schools Out or something?
Yes,
was one
you
of
had,
them,
you had
isn't it?
Schools Out, which was basically the summer break between fourth grade and fifth grade. Then you had Taking the Fifth, which was then moving to fifth grade.
Mhm.
And you had All Grow Down, which was the opposite of the Rugrats All Grown Up, whereby they go back to kindergarten effectively. They're still the same characters and they're still the same age group, but they go back to kindergarten. I've not seen any of them. I've been reading about them today, so I'll probably pick them up because again, they're all on Disney Plus.
Do you know what I'm saying now? I don't think I've ever seen it. I've got a vague recollection actually that I may have gone to see the first one, Schools Out, in the cinema because I had a cinema card.
Yeah, that was released
it.
theatrically. The rest was straight to video.
Yeah. I've got a feeling I may have watched that in the cinema actually. Can't remember thing one about it.
No, I don't think I've seen it. I don't think I've seen any of them. The only thing I did pick up from reading about them today is that in Schools Out, Melissa Joan Hart played his sister, TJ's older sister.
Pretty sure I've seen it.
And then in the others, Tara Strong played his older sister, whose name I can't remember.
Okay. Pretty sure I did go and see it in the cinema just because I had a cinema card, so it cost me fuck all.
Yeah, you paid for it anyway. So I'll go.
And in those days, I literally went to the cinema when it opened on Saturday morning, and I stayed there till it shut on Saturday night, and I watched just about everything. And I can vividly see the poster for it.
Yeah, because
I've got
looks like a slightly more sophisticated animation style with the poster. It looks a bit. It's film animation, then it's glossier, it's more expensive, and it looks slightly more three-dimensional.
Yeah, and I remember it had a vaguely kind of action movie pose almost where they're all running into frame and stuff.
Yeah.
Pretty sure I might have watched it. Just can't remember thing one about it. So don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. You might be that I only watched it once and I watched something much, much better after it, so I never remembered it that day.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, it's on Disney Plus, so check it out.
Well, that's the thing. It costs fucking nothing, and that's the other thing as well, listeners. You know, the last couple of weeks actually, we've picked some absolute fucking doozies to get hold of, some really difficult fucking shows to get hold of, but get hold of them we have, and you know we like to do it legally, which is why some things are still on the list, and we still haven't worked out how to do them legally. This one is fucking easy, so to not go and watch some of this, I'll be honest, I think you're doing yourself a disservice. Like,
yeah, definitely. I mean, even if you were to pick up the first, I don't know, 4 episodes of season 1. So you're talking 8 stories, 80 minutes, give or take.
Yeah.
No, it's the length of a movie. You're not going to come away from it and go, well, that was a waste of fucking time.
No, you're definitely not. I think you'll come away from it having go in intending to watch 4, and you'll come away from it 8 episodes later, I think.
Yeah, and I think the thing as well, because the way they tell the stories, they're all stylistically different as well. Though you get some which are told, there's like a kind of noir take on them. There's some, for the most part, they are just your standard comedy episodes, but you get some where they do put they go for those sort of filmic themes as well. So that gives it a bit of difference and a bit of heft as well. But yeah, I mean, I went into this thinking, I remember liking it. Because I remember liking it, it's probably going to be dog shit because that tends to be how the show goes.
Yeah.
And I was very pleasantly surprised / pissed off at 2 o'clock this morning when I'm thinking, right, fuck, I need to go to bed because the kids are going to be up in 4 hours.
Yeah. I did most of my rewatch last night as well. I watched, I think 1 or 2 earlier on in the week. And last night it was a case of my wife was working late, so I was fending for myself. She was like, right, come home, eat some dinner. I'll put like another episode on while I'm eating dinner, and then like 20 minutes, it's done. I can go and like feed the cats, sort out the chinchillas, wash the dishes, make my sandwich for the morning, whatever. Next thing you know, I'm a couple of episodes in, she's due home from work, and I've done nothing. And I'm like, fuck. And I honestly think that was the only thing that stopped me. Otherwise, I'd have kept going. So that was probably a good thing. But yeah, it has got that effect, doesn't it? Of just, it's a time sump. In the best possible way.
Yes.
The best possible way, in that you will, I guarantee you will disengage your brain for the hour or whatever you're watching it. It's perfect feel-good stuff. The last thing we watched that I found this easy and just this enjoyable was Rent-A-Ghost, and I've banged on about that ever since. I don't think it's got quite the same level of just loveliness and joy that has. I don't think anything has yet. But it's definitely that kind of feel of just disengaged brain. and forget about everything that's going on out in the world. Just forget it. Just let's take a trip in the Wayback Machine. Go back 20 years to the playground, and yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed this. Can't recommend it enough.
Yeah, same here. As always, we'd love to know what people think. Get in touch on Twitter at SMPDpod. You can go to our website, ddpodcast.net, where you can also get our previous episodes and our other shows as well. Get in touch through there. You can drop us an email. We'll get back to you as quick as we can. On Facebook and YouTube with the Double Down Podcast Network. Wherever you get your podcast from, be it iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, Amazon Music. Like, share, subscribe. Leave some message there, and we'll get back to you as quick as we can. But until next time.
See you later.